Before the 5th century BCE, early Greek thinkers looked outward, trying to deduce the origins of the cosmos. But a specific shift occurred when philosophical inquiry turned inward, focusing instead on the mechanics of the human body. Alcmaeon of Croton led this specific transition, becoming the first thinker on record to treat human anatomy as a primary philosophical subject. He achieved two specific breakthroughs. He was the first to identify the brain as the physical seat of human understanding, and the first to formally define the epistemological limits of scientific inquiry. His work replaced the reliance on divine revelation with a system of evidence-based inference, the specific logical framework required for medical diagnosis. For centuries, later historians like Diogenes Laertius mistakenly categorized Alcmaeon as a member of the Pythagorean number cult, a label that obscured his actual methods. The primary historical counter-evidence comes from Aristotle. In his Metaphysics, Aristotle explicitly distinguishes Alcmaeon's empirical approach from the rigid mathematical framework of the Pythagoreans. This side-by-side comparison illustrates Aristotle's observation. The Pythagoreans relied on a fixed table of exactly 10 pairs of opposites. Alcmaeon, however, observed an indefinite, highly variable number of opposing pairs driving human biology, such as hot and cold or wet and dry. This willingness to accept a messy, untidy reality indicates that his conclusions were guided by direct biological observation, rather than forced to fit a preconceived mathematical dogma. Stripping away the Pythagorean myth is essential. It allows us to evaluate his actual legacy as an independent scientist building a physiological framework from the ground up. We can see the rules of his science in the surviving fragments of his work. In Fragment B1, Alcmaeon outlines the absolute limits of human cognition regarding the aphanes, a Greek term meaning the imperceptible or invisible. He sets down his first axiom by stating that absolute clarity, or sophoneia, belongs exclusively to the gods. He contrasts divine certainty with the human condition. Humans cannot directly perceive the internal workings of the body, so they must use tekmairestai, meaning to judge or conjecture based on signs. Because we cannot directly observe the hidden internal realities of the body, we have to rely on external observable signs to make educated inferences. This single epistemic rule serves as the foundational axiom of clinical medical science. It provides the philosophical justification for diagnosing an invisible disease by reading visible physical symptoms. Applying this empirical framework to anatomy, Alcmaeon entered the debate over where human intelligence actually resides. At the time, many thinkers favored a cardiocentric model, placing intelligence in the heart. He did not use systematic dissection to map the whole body. Instead, he excised a specific animal eyeball to closely study its physical connections. This diagram represents his anatomical discovery, physical channels linking sensory organs to the brain. He observed what he called poroi, leading from the eye toward the inner skull. If the brain shifts, these channels are pinched, cutting off sensory input. Based on this anatomy, he made a sharp psychological distinction. Animals only perceive raw sensory data, while humans use the brain to synthesize these inputs to create actual understanding. By physically linking the eye to the brain, Alcmaeon provided the first tangible anatomical evidence for an encephalocentric model, shifting the seat of intelligence from the heart to the skull. Beyond the brain's synthesis of sensory data, Alcmaeon also sought to explain the overall systemic health of the physical body. To describe these biological states, he borrowed terminology directly from late 6th century Greek political reforms. He introduced isonomia, equality of power in a democracy, applying it to opposing physical powers like hot and cold. Health is maintained by this egalitarian balance, but disease occurs when one element achieves dominance. He called this pathological imbalance monarchia, or sole rule. This political metaphor provided a highly rational framework for medicine. It defined disease as a mechanical, systemic imbalance that could be observed and treated, rather than an arbitrary divine curse. To explain what actually drives this balanced biological system, Alcmaeon turned to kinematics, investigating the motion of the soul. His premise was that the soul must exist in a state of perpetual, unceasing motion in order to generate and sustain life. Because the soul moves continuously and in a circular manner, he argued it shares the precise kinematics of the divine, immortal heavenly bodies. However, he contrasted this immortal circular motion of the soul with the strictly linear and finite nature of the human physical body. In Fragment 2, he notes that human bodies perish because they are not able to join their beginning to their end. While the soul operates on a continuous, self-sustaining loop, the physical biology of the human body ages linearly. Eventually, the body simply fails to sustain the soul's orbit. This specific view of the soul perfectly bridged his new empirical biological observations with the established cosmological heritage of his Ionian predecessors. Alcmaeon successfully grounded abstract cosmological speculation into the physical realities of blood, brain tissue, and sensory channels. His structural model directly influenced the giants of Greek intellectual development over the next century. Early medicine absorbed his findings. The Hippocratic treatise on the sacred disease directly adopted his encephalocentric view of consciousness. Plato's Timaeus directly utilizes both Alcmaeon's brain-centric model of intelligence and his concept of health as an elemental equilibrium, and Aristotle would later formally codify Alcmaeon's three-step empiricist epistemology, moving from senses to memory to knowledge in his posterior analytics. While he left behind only a handful of textual fragments, Alcmaeon's structural theories formed the invisible scaffolding for the classical scientific revolution. How did early science achieve such accurate architectural models of the nervous system without advanced systematic tools? Scientific progress did not begin with perfect anatomical mapping. It began with establishing the correct philosophical posture. These three pillars, empiricism, encephalocentrism, and isonomia, established the first structural framework for viewing the human body as a coherent, mechanical system. But his true, enduring genius was recognizing the epistemological boundary. He advanced science by formally admitting exactly what humans cannot see. Alcmaeon of Croton proved that rigorous observation, grounded by the humility of human limits, is the only reliable bridge to understanding the mechanics of life.